Hey guys, my name is Jordan and today is Tuesday, which means it is time for Tuesdays with Jordan. Woohoo! Today we are going to be talking about cheap ways to travel because I think that the most important thing about growing up, and especially when you are needing to experience the world from living in a small place like I do, is by traveling the world or even the country as its own. Traveling can be very expensive. And the problem with that is that a lot of people don't necessarily always have a lot of money to go and spend on traveling. There's actually a lot of different ways out there in order to save money while you're traveling and to have just as much fun and remember all the experiences as well. Here's a couple of tips that I'm going to give you that I've had over my experiences of traveling abroad. First off, on transportation. Of course, you can choose trains, planes, or automobiles as your mode of transportation to wherever you're going. And of course, there's positives and negatives depending on where you're going on location, but a couple of things to remember about all of them. First off, planes. Planes are actually a really efficient way of getting pretty much anywhere, as long as you live close to a major international airport or an airport that has a lot of flights going out of it. Usually flights tend to be pretty reasonable. Now, it's important, however, though, to continue to watch those flights. Let's say that I'm going from St. Louis to Los Angeles. I'm going to type in flights from St. Louis to Los Angeles. In that, it's going to come up with this calendar that I get to choose any date that I want to on there, and it's actually going to show me how much it's average going to cost at that moment in time. If I click on that, it looks at all the different airlines. So it looks at Delta, American Airlines, Frontier. The only airline that it doesn't look at is Southwest Airlines, which does their own little thing, but they're really easy to look on their website as well to see their prices. Also, another thing that is really cool about Google Flights is the fact that you can actually track the difference in changing on prices. All you have to do is hit a notification there once you've searched it, and it'll actually let you know every single time that that price either goes up or down, so that if you're trying to track it and watch it when it gets to its cheapest point, it'll do that. With trains are really cool ways to go and see the country, and if they're pretty good for long distances or also short distances as well. A couple things to keep in mind though, train tickets are pretty inexpensive, however, the problem comes to being on time. So if you have to be in a place on time, trains aren't always the best option because they can run anywhere from 30 minutes behind all the way up to 10 to 15 hours behind. It really all depends. And the last one, automobiles. So first off, if you're going to go travel somewhere, usually the cheapest way to get there is by driving. Gas is pretty inexpensive and a lot of cars these days get pretty good gas mileage. If you can do that and you have that ability to spend that much time on the road, you're going to have a pretty cheap trip just to begin with. However, if you do tend to fly somewhere or go somewhere else, definitely look into either renting a car or using an Uber or a Lyft when you get there. A couple things about those categories. So for renting cars, if you're actually younger than 25, one thing to keep in mind is they tend to charge you an upsurge in price. Usually that's anywhere from a $50 to $75 fee, usually doubling or tripling your rate on that rental car as well. So kind of good, something to keep in mind and look at, and make sure that when you're looking at pricing and stuff like that, you mark that you are under the age of 25 if you are. If you're not, your car is probably going to be really cheap to rent. If you are looking at possibly going to another city and you don't have a car and you're like 21, like my age, and you really don't want to spend all that money on renting, there's also a lot of other ways that are really cool, which is pretty common from a lot of people. Uber and Lyft are two competitors that compete against taxis and tend to be 10 times cheaper. In even bigger cities like Miami and LA, a lot of Ubers will actually have something called Uber Pool. It may take you a little bit longer to get there, but you're gonna save $5 or $10. Now, another important part of vacation that tends to be really expensive is when you go somewhere, you actually have to stay in accommodations. So there's a couple of different things that you can actually do in order to save some money on that. There's 3 different things that have actually recently become pretty trendy and cool things to do as of our age. One of those is, first off, hostels. Hostels have been around for hundreds of years, but they have started to become, I think, a little bit more trendy and things that people our age really want to do. They're really cheap ways to actually stay, and there's a great way to break the idea of what people think of necessarily hostels. A great way to do that is to actually go to www.hostelworld.com. They do reviews from customers of their hostels all across the country and world. So if you're traveling even to Miami, or if you're traveling to New York City or Oregon or anything like that, you can go online and type in your location that you're going to and the dates, just like you would on a hotel site, and it's gonna pop up with them. Hostels tend to be a lot cheaper. Usually they range in price anywhere from $10 a night all the way up to like $35, $40 a night if you're sleeping in a large room with like 6 or 8 people, which is pretty good for most of these places that you're staying in. Another thing to look at as well is Couchsurfing. Couchsurfing is an amazing website that you all can look up, or you can also download the app. Usually doesn't cost anything to stay with these people with Couchsurfing. These are people who they have opened up their homes and really just love the idea of company coming and constantly staying on their couches and stuff like that, and them being able to be hospitable and take people around the area and stuff like that. And that's the joy that they get out of it. Usually these are older people who really just are kind of bored to be that by themselves and usually live in areas that are frequented by tourists. Another thing that you can do, which will help you save money, is Airbnbs. If you're traveling in large groups, Airbnbs tend to be less expensive because you can split the cost and usually get a large apartment or possibly even a house to rent, which is really cool. Another important factor is really looking at the time that you're able to travel. There are different times that are really good for traveling and not so good for traveling for people on a budget. So for instance, if you're wanting to go somewhere during spring break, a lot of things are going to be relatively expensive. January and February tend to be pretty cheap months to travel. Also, September and October also tend to be pretty cheap months as well. You'll find lots of deals on hotels, hostels, airlines, all sorts of things like that, and you'll also have a lot of availability as well, which is really good. And lastly, of course, I really do want to suggest that if you are going to go to a new place that you've never been to before, look in and research before you go. Really look at what you are going to be stepping into so you have an idea of if there's any places you need to kind of avoid for crime, if there's any hot spots you need to see or any tourist things that you need to really go to. You know, make sure that you look at all of those because those are sites that people put their opinions out there that are actually going there to vacation. And they're pretty much in a similar boat as you. They don't necessarily want to spend a lot of money. So sometimes they'll leave some tips on there that are really important for you. If you all have any really good tips as well for traveling cheap, make sure you comment them below. I really do appreciate you guys watching this video, and I hope that it helps save you a little bit of money and make an amazing experience with it. As always, have a gay day.